Okay. Um, in recovery, I've been fortunate enough to meet a great many special people since Zoom entered our lives, and I count today's facilitator, this month's facilitator, right, real high on that list. So it is a great honor for me to give you our friend Bill Cleveland.
Hey everybody, good to be here. Bill Alcoholic. My sobriety date is March the 27th, 1985. My home group is Hermosa Beach Men's Stag. We have merch. I have a shirt here that says HBMS on it, so I'm representing the crew. I go there tonight. I'm afraid not to. Seems to be working so far. So the paragraph we're on, it says here, we found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, God forbid, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. The wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we express the idea, voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though, if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once. So when I sponsor guys, and we get to the third step, this has happened to me several times, but I'll say to the guy, are you ready to do the third step? And occasionally I get the answer, no, I'm not. I said, well, why not? He says, well, I have a problem with God. And I said, well, so do I. Let's pray. The guy will say, well, I don't even believe in God. And I go, nobody really does. We're all just whistling in the dark, hoping for the best. And I've run out of options. So what do you say we pray? And you get some interesting responses with that. And that was my experience with my sponsor. I got to AA and I had a problem with the God thing. I didn't believe it. And I wanted to argue with him about God. And he said to me one time, he says, well, I don't believe in the God you don't believe in either. And that's confusing because I want to argue with you. And what I've discovered about being an atheist is somebody that creates a God and then doesn't believe in it. And I think in Alcoholics Anonymous, we get to experience it. And it's much more of an experience to me than it is a concept. When you get into the concept business, then there can be an argument. And so what I have guys do is I have them write out their own prayer, make it their own. And as it says in here, the wording was quite optional. And there are some people that will tell you that you have to believe in a God to do AA, and I don't think that's true. It's not been my experience. If you stick around long enough, it will come and visit you, right? And so the third step is important. When I got sober in 1985, I went through a recovery place, and then they released me to the world's aftercare program, Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's two things that happened to me that I think are just quite pure luck, really. And the first one's probably the most important. And this one got me through all the arguments I might have had about the philosophy you were trying to lay on me. And the first thing that happened was I just liked it right away. It isn't everybody's story. A lot of people struggle with it for a long time. The first meeting I walked into was at the Hermosa Beach Alano Club, South Bay Alano Club in Hermosa Beach, California. And it was a Friday night meeting. It was called The Gong Show. And somebody was there, Linda was going, yeah, I remember that. And I walked into that room. I walked up there right on time because who knew that an AA meeting would be full on a beautiful summer evening in Hermosa Beach in April of '85. Why would it be full? Why would there be so many people there? All the Harleys were parked out front, which was kind of intriguing. And I wasn't expecting that. And the room was packed. And I stood in the back of the room and I didn't feel part of because I wasn't. I didn't know anybody. And, I stood in the back of that room and everybody was dressed up trying to hook up. I mean, it was crazy. Rocky Hudson was the secretary and he had Rocky's 20 questions like, is the economy recovering faster than you? And it's like, and they started laughing. One guy got up to the podium to share and they hooted at him so much he just sat back down. Clearly a very loved man in this room full of nutcases like you, and I wasn't expecting you. I wasn't expecting, did you know when you got to AA, did you think it would be fun? I didn't know it would be fun. Did you? God, I've had a hell of a good time in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know it was going to be a good time. And I started laughing. And the way I describe that now today, I wouldn't have said it in these terms back then because I didn't know anything. I started laughing and I got the joke right away. I heard the music right away. And we laugh at the tragedies and we cry at the successes here. It's an odd place. And when you first walk in, it seems strange to me. And I feel lucky that I walked into that raucous meeting because it was perfect for me. It isn't perfect for everybody, but I'm an old hippie from the 60s. I'm a party guy. I'm an extrovert, right? And like most of us, I ended up alone in the end. We're supposed to be a party and we end up just alone, sucking on a bottle. And I started laughing. I drove home that night and I said, this may not be so bad. This may not be so bad. I was intrigued with you right away. A couple of weeks went by and I asked this guy to help me. I asked him to be my sponsor. And what he said to me was, one of the things, he said many things to me that night outside the Alano Club. And he said, I want you to go home and read the doctor's opinion, make notes in the margin of what you agree with and what you don't. Be at my house Thursday at 5 o'clock and we'll discuss it. And I didn't argue with him. I think the bottom we hit here is the collapse of the alibi system. Because we have a story about what we tell of why we're this way. And you can't be an alcoholic and not know who they are. It's their fault that I'm in this state. It's the government, it's the Department of Motor Vehicles. Who the hell are they to tell me whether I can drive or not? I mean, it's that kind of, we have a story. We're emotionally immature. We're like teenagers. And it's everybody else's fault. We can't take responsibility for our behavior because it's indefensible. But for some reason that night, I just did what he told me. I was just beat up, and I went home and I read my assignment. I made my notes. I showed up at the stranger's house Thursday at 5 o'clock. He let me in, sat me down in his living room, just the two of us alone, a very intimate, uncomfortable act. And he didn't trust me that I'd read it and he had me read it to him out loud. Now, each week I went to this man's house and we read another chapter in the book and we talked about it. And he let me argue. One of the things he told me that I still hold true today that really served me well is he says, my job as your sponsor is to guide you through the process of the 12 steps, that you might have some kind of a spiritual awakening and maybe you'll never drink again for the rest of your life because that happens here. He says, I'd be happy to sit here and listen to you tell me what you think your problems are so that you will not share about them in the meetings. And he says, the meetings are for recovery from alcoholism, not about how your day went. And I told him, I said, down there at that Alano Club, they are breaking that rule right and left. Should we go tell them? He said, no. He says, AA is a safe place. You can pretty much do whatever you want there. They really can't kick you out. He says, I'm just describing to you my Alcoholics Anonymous. So another lucky thing happened. I didn't run into somebody that believes that we don't express opinions or give advice because I'm a newcomer in AA. I need some good advice. I don't necessarily need to be told what to do, but I need some good advice. And I'm not getting along very well. I have trouble with personal relationships. I mean, I'm in trouble. I'm a mess and I have no idea how big of a mess I am. I'm just a mess. And he's right off, he started giving me advice, giving me his opinion, and So we read the doctor's opinion, and then we read Bill's story, and then we read each chapter, and then we get to the part where the third step is. And this is my experience with it. This is the way it went down for me. All I can really share with you. I have a lot of opinions about it and so on, but this is what happened. When we got to that third step, he did not get down on his knees with me and hold my hand and say the third step prayer with me. No, I didn't know that's what you do. He just didn't do that with me. And sometime later, it was we have a roundup here called the South Bay Roundup, and this was the first year of that roundup. This was the first year. And he was down there on a booth or something, like doing something of service. He's always of service. He's still like that. I have the same sponsor for 39 years. I should have fired him several times, but he needs me now. I make him look good. You know, it's like I'm his most famous baby. And so we're still together. And he's a weirdo, man. I'm going to tell you, this guy is a hope to die God freak. It's just embarrassing, you know. And I'm this intellectual atheist, so I think, right? And so you can imagine the interaction between it. One day he put his hand on my chest to stop me from talking, because that's what you have to do sometimes. You need to stop me so you can get a word in edgewise. And he looked right at me. He says, Bill, we don't need you here. You need us. Resign from the debating society. I remember leaving his house that day and go, man, this is not therapy. This guy's insensitive. He doesn't get it. You know, it's just like this. And I'm a mental institution guy. I've done a lot of therapy. I've been gestalted and Rolfed and primal scream. I know more about myself than is safe to know, but it is, after all, my favorite subject, you know? And so this is the kind of thing I ran into. So he's down at this roundup, and I'm having some kind of crisis. I don't even remember what it was, but I wasn't well received at home. My life was a mess. My wife was trying to find a place to go to, and it was just, you know, it was in turmoil. I'm a newcomer in AA, and by this time I'm, what, I don't know, 3 or 4 months sober. And I called him up on the portable phone. I think he had a flip phone. This is back in the dark ages, you know. And I start whining to him about my problem. He says, why don't you come down here and talk to me? Come down here to the roundup. Okay. So I get in my car and I drive down to the hotel where all these people are roaming in. The place is crowded. We're sitting in the lobby of this Marriott. And I'm talking to him, and he looks at me. He says, do you want me to pray with you? Which is, you know, I mean, that's a private subject, don't you think? I mean, he just looked right at me. He said, do you want me to pray with you? And my response was, would you please? I don't know why that came out of my mouth. And he says, well, how about right here? And we're in the lobby, you know. And I said, please don't make me do that. I think I would have done it, you know. And we went around the corner down this hallway, and there was a little bench there in the side hallway in this hotel. And he sat down with me, and he put his arm around me. And he said, which was uncomfortable, and he said, breathe God in, breathe yourself out. Breathe God in, breathe yourself out. And we did the third step there that day, that afternoon. And for years after that, we would go back and visit the shrine down that hallway where that bench was. That's where that's where the great Bill C did his third step, you know, unwillingly, you know, in severe distress about something that I can't even remember. And I asked him, I said, why didn't you do that with me when we read the book, when we got to that place? He says, because I was afraid you'd come across the table at me. I just think you just weren't ready. I'm 6'5". He's like 3'2". You know, it's like I can be very intimidating, you know, and that was funny. We still talk about that to this day. We talk about Bill C's third step. I think ceremony is important. There's something about ceremony. There's something about doing something even if you don't want to. Now, to me, what the third step is interesting. I mean, you do, the first step, the first pillar of some kind of spiritual condition, if I'm a newcomer in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And it says in the 10th step that the only thing that's going to save us is the maintenance of our spiritual condition. So my job as a newcomer is to get one of those. I don't have anything to maintain. I don't have a spiritual condition. So it's going to take a while. How long, many of you here, I can tell you've been sober a long time. How long does it take to get a spiritual condition? I think it took me 10, 15 years to where I could actually recognize maybe I have one of those. Because I'm a self-reliance guy, you know. I don't have a condition, a spiritual condition, you know. Bill Wilson didn't have a spiritual condition. And then something happened to him in Towns Hospital that changed the course of all of our lives, you know, all of us, you know. And the more you know about the history of AA, the more remarkable it is that we're sitting here, man. It's like, it's just stunningly remarkable. So I have to get a spiritual condition so that somewhere down the road, I can maintain it. It also says in there that I'm going to rest on these things called laurels, and I shouldn't do that. Well, what's a laurel? A good definition of a laurel that I came up with was a past success, something that I've done in the past that I can then rest on. So I need to get some laurels so that I can later rest on them and find out why that's not a good idea. And I think one of the first steps to that whole thing is this third step. You know, I mean, that was a big surrender for me to call and ask this stranger for help and then pray in a public place for that help. I would have never come up with that on my own. I wouldn't think to do that. I never got on my knees in the drunk tank and asked God to save me. I would have never crossed my mind to do that. I wasn't resistant to doing it. I didn't even think that way at all, that would cause anything. So when I did that third step with him, with this, what's it say? We're trying to take this spiritual step with an understanding person. That sponsor was an understanding person. He knew what I needed. I've now been sober a long time, and I know that when you're sitting there with me out in my backyard in my ashram, and we're reading the book together, and I know you're not going to want to do this with me. And if you will, I'll hold your hand and we'll say the prayer. I'll have you write out your prayer. I've written several of them. And here's one that I wrote back in 2008. Because when I have guys do that, I do one on my own. And I wrote this prayer. See if I can find it real quickly. And I read this today, and I still think this is what I wrote as a third step prayer, trying to get closer to this, trying to do this ceremony over and over again. I go, Father, open my heart. Help me to love fearlessly and without concern for consequences. Relieve me of the aspects of my nature that block me from being truly intimate with my fellows. Guide me down the path that leads to the oneness of all things. Open my eyes that I may see the beauty of what is, the tranquility in the moment, the peace and the acceptance of what is. Relieve me of the bondage of having to live my life. Help me to simply watch it unfold. I really like that. I think I believe that, if there is such a thing, you know, that fits me, you know, and I know now better than ever. The third step is interesting. It says that I'm going to turn my life and will over to clearly what already has it anyway, right? I think it was nice of them to lead me to believe that I actually have some say in the matter, you know? Well, I've been withholding myself from the totality of all things long enough. I'm going to acquiesce now and allow you to take me. Thank you very much. Where's my trophy, right? And we have these windy arguments about the difference between my will and God's will, as if that's even possible, right? You know, once again, subject, object, right? I'm the subject always, and everything else is an object. And I'm missing this thing that I need to get in me. You know, like I don't think there's any difference between my will and God's will at all, you know? And I can tell you right now, I know what God's will is. Maybe it'd be worth it you showing up to this meeting. I'm going to give you this secret that's been withheld from all of us. God's will is what's happening right now. What else could it possibly be? And I don't like what's happening right now. I'm looking for an alternative, and there is none. Right? This is called acceptance. You know, if I really recognize how powerless I am, acceptance just happens, right? I don't have to go get it. If I understand how utterly powerless I am. And that ceremony, when I sat there with that understanding person that day in that hallway, was me opening my heart up and saying, I need help. Would you please help me? And I can't imagine anything of a spiritual nature. All I had to deal with was this guy that I called sponsor. It was younger than me and had a full head of hair, all of which pisses me off, you know? I mean, I hardly knew the guy, and yet I did that. I still find that amazing that I was willing to do that. I don't even know how willing I was. I just reached a point where I didn't have any other options. All there was Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went down to that place with all these strangers that I didn't know, and I felt uncomfortable, and I sat with this weirdo, and I said that prayer, and I breathed God in and breathed out, and I did what he told me to do. The first time I said a real prayer in my house that's on my own, I went in the bathroom and locked the door so nobody would see me. I embarrassed myself by doing that. It's like I was giving up something. I don't have no idea what that was. I would say that that was all ego, the Bill C ego that still is very prominent in my life. But back then, there was a bottom that I hit. So the understanding person, a sponsor, I think he was my first God. And I think that what became larger after that was AA. I think Alcoholics Anonymous is a really good God. It's a great power that's greater than myself. And at 39 years sober, I am still able to tap into the energy, even through this screen, of sitting with a room full of people, most of whom are conscious of the fact that their life has been saved. That's a power greater than me. And when I acquiesce to that and give in, then I am part of that power. I no longer feel separate from it. When we had the minute of silence, I closed my eyes and I breathed and I said, speak through me. Help me tell these people how I feel about your program rather than what I think about it. I can't stop thinking about it. It's like, and I come to conclusions and stuff. And over the years, as I've gotten older in sobriety, I'm just more willing to give up on those conclusions and let new ones come in, because it happens all the time. God is an experience. They asked Eckhart Tolle one time in one of his talks, why don't you use the word God? He always talks about being. He doesn't use the word God. And when asked that question, he goes, because when I use God, then you put your big bag of stuff in the middle of the table, and now we've got to talk about that. And I'm not talking about that at all. I love that stuff. I love that kind of stuff. The openness of that, And that surrender of doing the third step with a stranger, is the first step in that direction. Yes, I admitted I was powerless. I was really sick. I was physically very ill. And I was a lot more ill than I thought I was. At 30 years sober, I had a liver transplant. I almost died from alcoholism at 30 years sober. They saved my life and I got a liver transplant. So in 1985, if I hadn't gotten sober and got somewhat healthy after that, I think I would have been dead a long time ago. I had hepatitis C. They didn't call it that then. They called it non-A, non-B, right? They said something else will kill you. They were wrong about that. It's like, and I had cirrhosis and it was a lot worse than I knew it was. I didn't know how sick I was. When you're drinking like that, you don't go to the doctor. You just drink more and ignore what you're feeling inside. Well, I think I was probably, when I did that third step with him, I got sober in March. I think this was August when we had the first roundup. So I was several months sober. And I said that third step prayer and it changed my life. With that man, when I did that, it changed my life with that understanding individual. And he knew what was wrong with me. I didn't know. I didn't know what was wrong with me. Now, today, when I sponsor guys, I get some new guy. I know he's not going to change right away. He's not going to change by some words that I say to him. I think the whole basis of sponsorship is to develop a relationship with the person that you're sponsoring. And maybe, like what happened to me, I can carry him through the hard times, that he'll trust me. There's something about this identification in AA where we just trust these strangers and we do things that we normally wouldn't do. What else do you need to know about the God thing? At 39 years sober, March the 27th, 1985 has more significance today than it ever did back then. Something touched me, something outside of myself, of my egoic mind, something touched me and took the obsession away. And I've never had it since. I've never had it. I've come close to drinking a couple of times, but I've never had the obsession. I've had some trauma and tragedy in my life happens, you know. Divorces happen, sickness happens, you know. I was in a position in my 30 years sober where people were coming by to say goodbye to me. That's an odd experience. You can see it in their eyes, you know. And what I can tell you about that experience, and I think this has a lot to do with the third step, I wasn't afraid, but I was profoundly disappointed because I wasn't done yet, you know. And I got another chance. My life got saved in 1985 and I got saved again in 2017. I'll never, ever forget waking up after that surgery, and it was pretty traumatic. I was in the hospital for months after it. There were some problems, and it took, my kidneys then failed and a bunch of stuff happened. But my wife was leaning over the bed looking at me with tears in her eyes. She goes, "Baby, you're not going to die." That was really good news. It's like, you know, that was, it, I don't know if I cried, but it was pretty emotional, you know. I told the doctors when they were coming around to see me, and you're in the liver department, so they know who you are. Nobody, no doctor or nurse ever asked who all these people were coming to see me. They've seen AA a lot in the liver department at Cedars, you know. But I told them, I said, I know you saved my life and I'm not going to waste this time. I'm going to send you more customers. You know, that's why I'm here. That's why I was saved. Isn't that why we're here? I mean, I think the purpose that we have here is to sponsor people. What else is there to do? There's really nothing else to do. I mean, we can study the history. That's all fun, you know, and I enjoy all that. My sponsor's a history geek, and I get accused of being a historian because I'm with him. It's like, you know, you know, and I love all that. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love the meetings. I love the energy. But I think the reason I'm here is to say yes. You know, Howard calls me up and says, "Will you do this?" Well, shit, I don't really want to. But here I am. And I can feel the energy. This is where I'm supposed to be right now. I'm not supposed to be anywhere else, but right here. Before this, I was talking to a guy out of my little ashram. That's where we smoke cigars and talk about God that we don't believe in, you know, and read the book together and do inventory and listen to fifth steps. You know, it always amazes me when you trust me enough to read me your fifth step. The most important fifth step you'll ever be involved in is the first one you listen to. It's much more important than the one that you do. The one you listen to, that's when your life has changed. Now you know why you're here. When you can see the light come on in people's eyes. That's how you realize it's come on in your eyes. That's how you know that. I will learn more about myself through your eyes than I'll ever flesh it out on my own. When two people come together, not just one is helped, right? You know, some of the third steps that I've had guys read to me, I go, dude, that's really good shit, man. Where did you come up with that, you know? My friend Steve Lamb says he has one guy that's Jewish that believes in Buddhism, so he's a Boo-Jew, you know? I mean, some of the gods we put together. Have you ever had I've had the experience, I was just talking about this recently, from Peter Marinelli, you know, him and Landis led our retreat a couple of weeks ago. And Marinelli talked about his Catholicism, and he told the story about going back to the church with a different attitude. I've had that happen with guys, I had this one guy, he's my oldest sponsee to this day. And some years ago, he calls me, he goes, guess where I am? I said, what? He says, I'm in the Catholic Church. I go, dude, what happened, man? Because he hated that Catholic. He says, well, man, I don't know. Just something led me back here. He says, they talk program all the time here. And I go, dude, we stole it from them. It's like, but now he's not involved in all the dogma of it. He just enjoys the fellowship, the strength of sitting in a room with people. I couldn't walk into churches when I was new. I wouldn't walk into a church. God, somebody might see me. That's all bullshit over there. I've been to churches all over the world. You know why I go in there? Because people have been praying and meditating in those places for thousands of years. Can't you feel that? Don't you feel that in AA? I feel that in Alcoholics Anonymous, the energy of life saving, I mean, all of us here are in an organization where people's lives are saved every day. And the mechanism that's used for that is us. We're the counselors, right? You stop and think about this. I've been to a mental institution, lockdown mental institution twice, and I've been married 3 times. And people ask me for relationship advice. I give it to them. I figure, what the hell? You can't hurt them. They're in AA, So, we are the counselors. We're the bishops. We're the priests, us, of all people. Like some people in religion especially, they tell you if you behave well, then God will come to you. In AA, we know that's not true. God comes to us in our brokenness. That's when it happens. You read the life stories of all the saints, they were awful. And then something happened, I mean, you think about it, the organization that we're in was founded and written and structured by a man who was a highly educated, conservative Wall Street guy that didn't believe in God. He hated Franklin Roosevelt, because Roosevelt was a goddamn communist. He was all this social program. And this man created the most socialist organization on the planet. If that's not a spiritual awakening, I don't know what is, even from a political sense, AA shouldn't be here, but here we are. Here we are. Almost 90 years. Here we are. The other thing about that, Howard knows this, if it goes on through the centuries, we will be considered the pioneers, the people in the first 100 years. It's still evolving. It's still new. It's new on the scene. This is a new thing. And there's millions of people that are walking free on the planet because of this. You think how silly this is, Every meeting is autonomous. You can pretty much do whatever you want. That makes no sense at all, And what I've come to understand about that, because all of us here will talk about good meetings and bad meetings. There's good meetings, bad meetings. And I think I know what you need, but I don't really. And I think one of the reasons it's like that, because when I walked into that room at the Gong Show, it was perfect for me. Someone else would be appalled by that, right? They need to go into a meeting where it's more like group therapy and nobody's hitting on them and they can sit there for a while. They feel comfortable and relaxed. And then 2 or 3 years down the road, they look for something more. That's why AA is the way. It's for everybody. It's all inclusive. If there's any rules in AA, the number 1 rule is everyone gets to come. And you and I know both some people should be weeded out of this goddamn thing, don't you think? It's like, goddamn thing. It's a good thing I'm not running it, because I'd have requirements, and we don't have that here in AA. What a wonderful place we're in. And the third step, I think, is a key component, whether you do it right away or later on. At some point in the process of your recovery, you're going to beg for forgiveness, for help. Somehow that's going to happen in your life. And it's happened to me several times over the years where I've reached a point where I started meditating with real intent because I need help. I need help. Help from something that is not existing inside my head. And what I found in meditation is I can watch myself think. I can see I don't have to go where this thing wants to take me. It's not the enemy. It's not trying to hurt me. All it does is take the past and project it into the future. And in meditation, I can actually watch that operate. I'm on to it now. You know, it's part of me. It's not trying to hurt me. It needs me for transportation. But that first prayer I said with that man was the beginning of a pathway of recognizing that there's something deeper within me other than my thinking, egoic mind. And I try to get in touch and develop the skill of the watcher. You know, the best we can hope for is self-awareness. Self-awareness doesn't mean the behavior stops. We just stop blaming other people for it, you know. And the third step is the first step in that direction, to where you finally at some point you realize, oh my God, it's me. I'm the source of all the chaos in my life. When that happens, evolution can happen. Thank you for letting me share.